right, folks, it's 12 noon, and we're going to start our meeting. Thank you for everybody who coming. If you didn't sign the sign-in sheet in the back, please do so before you leave. I'd appreciate it. My name's Terry Thompson. I see some new faces here. We always start with a prayer and then the pledge, every one of our meetings. And for a prayer, I'd like to ask my uncle-in-law, Harold Hembry, sitting right here, 95 years young, and was a preacher for like 70-some years, and he even puts up with me. That's how much patience he's got at 95 years old. Would you lead us in the prayer, please? Thank you.
Let's stand.
Yeah.
Our Father and our God, giver, sustainer, and redeemer of life, we thank you for life in this day. We thank you for the life of each one here, and we ask your continued blessing upon each one. Be with us now as we gather. Enlighten us in our thinking. Enrich us in our dedication and service, and use us always to the glory of your name through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Harold. Now, let's see. Frank, would you lead us in the pledge?
Absolutely. Let's stand together.
Thank you.
Salute, pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Okay. A few quick introductions. As always, Stephen Phipps back there in the AV booth. We wouldn't have this venue if it wasn't for Stephen. I walk in here, he has the chairs set up, he has everything plugged in and ready to go, and all of his efforts are much appreciated. Back at the back table is my co-coordinator, Glenn Cope, also my friend and my pastor. We have applications back there if anybody wants to join OK2A, and he can explain anything if you have any questions on that while you're back there. Nathan, where'd you go? There he is in the back. This is my new friend, Nathan Deathloff. And he's one of Frank's staff, and we just met recently, but we've talked extensively, and he's a good guy. Joe Baden, there he is, little Joe. And Joe is the Kay County GOP chair, and he was at Boots and Bling, so if you got any questions about the big event, he could probably answer them.
I spent most of it outside cooking burgers.
Oh, okay. And our retiring representative, Ken Luttrell, and Ken's been real good about coming to meetings. Hello, Jay. Come on in. We were waiting for you.
Fashionably late as always.
Good. Like I said, fashionably late.
Yeah. We saved you a front chair because I know you like being up front where you can get everybody's.
Yeah, I want to get a hold of this guy.
Yeah. Okay. Now, before we get on to the meeting, everybody see our new coolest OK2A shirt. OK2A, continuing the fight, fight, fight. Does anybody know where the fight, fight, fight came from?
You bet.
Yeah, okay. These are available limited time. They're $27. You go to ok2a.org. It's the whole right-hand half of our website. You just click there, you pick your size. I've got 6 different colors, two ladies' shirts, and this, other than our membership, this is our main way of fundraising for OK2A. And the money that goes to OK2A makes things happen. In the last 12 years, we've gotten over 160 pro-Second Amendment, pro-liberty, and pro-freedom bills passed and signed into law here in Oklahoma. As opposed to most political groups that just want to sit around and whine and complain and table everything till next month, we make things happen. So your money is well spent. Plus, hey, now, while you're doing some good, you can walk around and look cool like me, right? Okay, all right.
But do we have to buy a white coat with it?
No. In fact, though my regulars here, I don't normally have a sport coat on, but since we've got our congressman here, I thought I would at least pretend like I'm half-assed professional. So, okay, let's see. This meeting is going to be streamed. It is being streamed, and my phone number is 580-670-0357. Do you still have that, Stephen? The phone number? Okay, great. If you're watching online and you have a question, text your question to my phone, and I will ask Frank in person here live, and you can hear his answer as you're streaming. Now, Frank Lucas was elected in 1994. Before that, he was 5.5 years under the dome down at the Capitol. He's the longest-serving Republican on the House Financial Services. He's also the longest-serving member on the House Committee on Agriculture, and that's a very important committee for Oklahoma. Let's see here. Chair of the Task Force on Monetary Policy, Treasury Market Resilience, and Economic Prosperity. Also serves on the Capital Market Subcommittee and the National Security Illicit Finance. That sounds interesting. And International Financial Institutions. He's got seniority, and he makes things happen down at the Capitol for us. Frank, it's all yours, brother.
Thank you, sir, and I appreciate the opportunity once again to be with you. I think it's been a couple of years probably since I was last here. And in the spirit of saving lots of time, which is our priority for questions, I'll be sort of brief up front and simply say, it's a crazy world back east. It is absolutely a crazy world back east. But in spite of that, we've accomplished a lot of things so far this year. Now, I always like to lay the political land out so people think about the environment that we work in back there, that I work in on your behalf. President Trump, as we now refer to him back east, Trump 47, surprised all of the world once again and prevailed in the last general election. Brought in a team that was actually different than the 16 election, because with the 24 election, in some ways, I'm not so sure everybody, including President Trump, wasn't kind of surprised by the outcome of the 16 election. But this time, they've hit the ground running. There are a list of people to put in various positions, their agendas, their goals, ready to go. And that's made a dramatic difference. Now, the political environment, the legislative environment in Congress and the House is tight and it's complicated. 435 members of the United States House. I am in the majority as a Republican because at the present moment, there are 3 more of us than there are Democrats. And there's a couple of special elections where Democrats have passed or left, where most likely in strong Democratic districts, they'll prevail again. So there, the margin will be even tighter after the next election. Actually, it'll be 5, we'll go back to 3. But there was a point in time early this year when the president took several of my colleagues to the administration with him when we only had a 1-seat majority. And Representative Luttrell understands the complications of a 1-seat majority in a multi-100-person body. But we've gotten our stuff done. And on the Senate side, Senator Langford and Senator Mullen are in the majority because there are 3 more Republicans than Democrats. And you say, well, can you depend on all of them? No. That's why the vice president being a Republican is so critically important, because on a number of major issues, Vice President Vance has broken the tie in our favor. But we're moving legislation. The so-called big, beautiful bill, using something from the 1974 Budget Act called reconciliation to try and reduce spending. But you can do that once in a budget cycle, which means it passes not just by simple majority in the House, but by simple majority in the Senate, instead of that 60-vote filibuster question over there. Passing that bill was critically important because it kept all of the tax relief provided by President Trump and your Republican Congress in 2017 from going away. Income tax, corporate tax rates, the death tax rates, all of those things would have gone back up if this bill had not passed. And it also included a 6-year extension of crop insurance and the commodity programs in the Farm Bill, critically important to raise food and fiber. But if that's not enough, it also represents the first real effort to reform, refrain, correct, however you want to describe it, the entitlement programs, addressing food stamps and the other welfare programs, work requirements, limitations on access, the first real reform. Because you see, the biggest part of federal spending now is not the things that they call discretionary, defense spending, general operations of the federal government, agriculture, those kind of things. It's the so-called entitlement programs, the things that are on automatic pilot, Medicaid, Medicare, those kind of programs. And this was the first piece of legislation to get out there. An issue that most of President Trump's predecessors and most of my predecessors didn't want to try and touch. So that's now in place. And we followed that then with a rescission bill, which was a reduction in spending programs in a variety of places. So that's now been accomplished. What lies ahead of us? The regular appropriations process, funding the government for the coming year, and funding it reflecting these changes. That's going to be a battle. And again, the other side of the room in the House and Senate don't want to touch anything, because if you make changes, then you're undoing the Biden-Pelosi spending priorities of past years. And a number of my very conservative friends want to pass something called a CR, because they say, well, if we pass a continuing resolution, if we just fund the rest of the new year at last year's numbers with the changes we made, then we'll reduce spending. There's some logic to that. But I would also suggest to you, if you just continue the old administration's priorities and spend a little less by flatlining, you still leave Biden and Pelosi's priorities in place. We need to do the appropriation bills to reflect the Republican congressional priorities. So we'll work our way through that. What else is going on? The struggles with China on the other side of the Pacific, the things going on in Eastern Europe. I would suggest to you that the biggest single threat to democracy around the world and the United States is what the Chinese Communist Party is doing in Beijing. Their military buildup, their economic pressure around the world, their Belt and Road projects, all those things. Give President Trump credit. We are refocusing with intensity on the Chinese. And we can talk about that more in a moment if you care to. But this is a long-term effort by Xi Jinping to dominate the world. Eastern Europe, the Russians and the Ukrainians. And we can talk about this in a moment if you care to. But let me simply suggest to you, the Ukrainians didn't invade the Russians invaded the Ukrainians. And Putin has the same attitude about power that Xi Jinping in China has about power. They are not friends of the market economy. They're not friends of democracies. We could talk about that in a moment if you care to. What else is going on? In the political sense, for just a moment, the president is encouraging the Texas Republican Party and the Texas legislature to consider a special mid-10-year redistricting program to try and add more Republican seats in Texas. In California, New York, Illinois, the Democrat parties and Democrat governors in control in those states have responded by saying, we'll redraw the lines here too. I'm not sure how all this comes out, but it will be a wild, politically bloody battle if it takes place. But with my fellow rep sitting in the room, I would say this. This is not an issue in Oklahoma because every member of Congress, Senate and House, are Republicans.
Amen.
There's no adjustments to be made in our lines. Supermajorities in the House and the Senate. Every statewide officer, if the rest of the country would follow the lead that we have taken down through the years, oh my. That said, brief enough? Can we throw the floor open and
Sure.
get down to the nitty-gritty?
Okay, now
See, I was on time, and I want credit for that, and I was relatively
You were
restrained
early.
in my opening remarks.
Hey,
Credit
Bob,
for that, too.
You were early. Okay, we're gonna open for questions, but we've got a lot of new faces here. My old timers know how I do it. So let me just give you, you'll be first. Okay. I do questions a little bit different than every other meeting I've been to. You raise your hand, I'll call on you in the order I see the hands raised as best I can. When I call on you, if you're able, please stand up and please speak up. So everyone can hear your question, and most importantly, please get to your question immediately. If you want to make a speech, come talk to me afterwards, we'll discuss it, and if you've got a valid point that would do some good for my group, then I will book you to speak at one of my meetings. But this is for questions. So we don't really need to know why you're asking the question. We just need to know what your question is. And Frank will be able to handle it. And I'm sure, even if you got a tough question, I'm sure he can handle it because he's been doing this for a while. So, okay, you're number one.
And clearly I play by the rules too.
Okay, I have a full set of questions, but here's
Of
the
course.
first
Okay,
one.
well, we're gonna do them one at a
No,
time, and
I
I'll
know.
come back to you.
Okay.
Okay, good.
And my wife would have been here, but she gets a little irate, so I have to tell her to stay home. This is one dear to our heart.
Okay, ask
I'm
away.
87 years old.
Okay.
And here is the question.
Ask the question, please.
We would like to have the people who are lifetime viewers and listeners of NPR and PBS. We have been on that for years. And we have found their programs to be civil, to be family friendly, and inspiring. And people at our age, when you can have this, the question, why would Congress vote to defund something so good for our country when the other stations are at odds with each other?
Okay, so your
And
question
why
is
did
why-
we vote that way in Oklahoma?
Okay, I'll let him answer your question.
Unfortunately, not every state's public television system is like OETA. I grew up on OEA too. Until I was 17 years old, the only television we got in Roger Mills County was KBII out of Amarillo, Texas. My high school classmates thought Dolph Briscoe was the governor of Oklahoma, the governor of Texas at the time. The view amongst this Congress was that we had to get a grip on spending, that these programs are important, and no offense to my representative in the room, that certain things were going to go back to the states if they were important to be funded. And it was a part of the overall reducing spending. The coming reconciliation packages are going to touch on a lot of things too. But yes, I watched Claudius as a 16-year-old. I didn't know about counterculture till I watched the reruns of Monty Python at Saturday night at 10:30 before I had a driver's license.
All right.
Short answer is funds are tight, the money's tight, not everybody works like Oklahoma, and public broadcasting on the national level paid a bit of a price.
And since I love to talk, their programming is far left. They didn't even cover the Hunter laptop story. They took as a given truth the Russiagate fraud that was run by the CIA, the FBI, and the DNC. So me personally, I was glad I supported them, and that's my reason. So excuse me for jumping in here. Okay, you were next, Mike.
What's the deal with Congress and not being able to pass an immigration bill? What's the big holdup?
The liberals in the body want the borders wide open. You remember the Biden system. Don't build a fence, let everybody in, give them public assistance, tell them to show up for a hearing a year or two in advance and let them go. My very conservative friends want the absolute most restrictive possible standards. And I agree, build the wall. I agree, standardize the enforcement. No more, just let everybody come in. The problem we have right now is the president has made in this, it's not a problem, the circumstances we're in, is the president's made a very big part of his agenda in shutting off the flow. And let me tell you, they have. If you look at the statistics from Homeland Security, the flood has become not just a dribble, it's dried up. But if we're going to actually go to the next step about how we address these issues, the president needs to declare victory so that we can move forward. There are some labor issues that have to be addressed in this country because first-generation Americans have always done the hard work. And let's be honest, unless you're a Native American, and I have no American Indian blood in me, you either are an immigrant or a descendant. But my ancestors all played by the rules. Let's declare victory on the border. We've accomplished what he set out to do. Let's look at the immigration laws and address how to address that and move forward. But I can't do it until he declares victory, because he's the only one that has credibility on this issue with the American people, Donald Trump.
I have a question from a viewer.
Okay?
What happened to the no tax on Social Security? That's
Because-
my question too, actually.
Because the way that the process works, you have to reduce spending. And my understanding, and I'm not on Ways and Means, I'm agriculture, financial services, as Terry alluded to. My understanding was it wasn't mechanically possible to do it. So what they did was you basically will get a deduction against your income to offset the taxes that you would pay on Social Security. Supposedly, the net effect is the same.
Oh, right, okay.
That's my understanding. Now, I know that there's some concerns out there amongst my fiscal conservative friends about taking people off the tax base. But let's be honest, most of our fellow Americans who are living in their retirement with a big focus on their Social Security, you're not leading a really exciting life. You're being very careful if you're living on that. And if you've got a job where you work for tips, now maybe if you're in the Waldorf Astoria in New York City or some fancy Hollywood restaurant, the tips are massive. But most folks who are working for tips in restaurants and service industry are living a very careful life too. The president's focus, and I agreed with this in Congress, in trying to help those people who are working hard, who have worked hard, is where we should have been.
Bill, you were next.
Yes, thank you. The Republican Party should take the lead in everything, and environmentalism is a strong party platform, constituent base for the Democrats. But we can industrialize much more cleanly than the rest of that world out there, China and India. Does the Republican Party have any plan to deindustrialize and clean up the underdeveloped world, or developing world, whatever it is? The world outside America.
And I'm going to have to answer that in the broad context of the majority that I serve with in the House and the administration. In this configuration we've been working in this time, which is different than the Democratic majority and Joe Biden, the focus has been basically fixing what's going on at home first. And once we address the economic issues, the tax issues, the energy issues at home, then I think we do focus on the rest of the world. But I would tell you this, from my time on the Science Committee, whether it's fusion power or a lot of research to make natural gas burn cleaner, the technology we develop will be able to be licensed, be able to be sold to the rest of the world to use too. So fixing our mess first doesn't mean that we're not going to help the rest of the world. It just means that the perfected systems we have, I think they'll flock to use.
Thank you.
And by the way, fusion power is ultimately where we go, the power of the sun. But is that 5 years or 50 years or 250 years? But you can't stop trying.
You're ready.
Chairman?
We're kind of divided on this, so it might make some people mad, but you brought this up in your opening statement about Russia invading Ukraine. Do you think that the last several decades of our foreign policy played any part of that? Because we had promised Russia, after the fall of the wall, that we would not expand NATO to the east, and we refused Russia from entering into NATO when they asked to. So we've marched NATO up to their border. Do you think that that has played any part in what Russia did with Ukraine?
Good question.
Well, first off, Soviet leadership went after communism and Gorbachev, it went to Yeltsin. And I think Yeltsin was somewhat of a democracy-oriented guy. Now, he had a really bad vodka habit, and it brought his administration and his life to an early conclusion. And his weaknesses enabled an old KGB secret policeman by the name of Putin to ultimately seize power. If we had stayed with the Yeltsin-style government, none of this, this wouldn't be going on. Boris understood the Russian people had to overcome 75 years of communism, and before that, 250 years of the Imperial Romanov administration. But he was at a weak point in his life, and he had weak habits, and he couldn't get it done. Now, the mistake we probably made was when Yeltsin was there, we should have reached out and worked harder with them to try and bring them farther into the Western world. Now, this is my editorial comment. I'm not so sure George Herbert Walker Bush or Dick Cheney or Don Rumsfeld, who were senior people in the WH administration, didn't believe just letting the Russians rot was the answer. When you let people just who've been defeated sit in misery, I think that's called World War I leading to World War II all over again. So we made a mistake. Now that said, Yeltsin's who we're dealing with now. Not Yeltsin, sorry. Putin's who we're dealing with now. Putin isn't going anywhere. He's kind of like the fella in China. He's now president for life. And he seems to be determined to recreate the Russian Empire. Now, back to the NATO thing. We had discussions in the late 90s and early 2000s about how far to take NATO. Poland, Latvia, Estonia, Bulgaria, those countries. No one disagreed with letting them come into the Western world. But that's why the Ukraine wasn't brought in at the time too, was the fear that that was going too far. Too far. But now we're where we are. And Putin bullied his neighbors in Georgia and Azerbaijan and all those places. And when the Ukrainians, remember what they call it, the spring of 18 or 15, whatever revolution, they kicked out the Russian-sponsored dictator, they made a statement they wanted to come our way. The thing about Putin is, take note of the number of opponents or former people who've worked for him who fall out of apartment buildings at high levels, who mysteriously walk in front of lead slugs walking down the street in places, whose automobiles have gas leak and explode. He's a bad guy. If I, in good faith, thought that surrendering the Ukrainian people to him would stop him, okay, we could have a debate about that. But you remember a little guy back in the 30s who said, if you'll just let me keep Austria, give me half of Czechoslovakia, oh, maybe the west half of Poland, I'll be satisfied. Anyone who's crazy enough to do that kind of stuff is too crazy to stop from doing it. So, short answer is, if you watched President Trump in the last month, he's figured Putin out. George Herbert Walker, no, that's not fair. George W. Bush didn't get him figured out in time. Remember, he's the one that said, I can see in this man's eyes, I can see his soul. Yeah, because there's not one. How could he see it?
Okay, Glenn was next, then you, and then back over here. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, my question revolves around the funding of Medicare. This past week, there was a large survey that came out in the national media that reported that the majority of those who took the survey who were Democrats all said we're going to be hit hard, bad by the big beautiful bill. Those who were Republicans, on the other hand, said there'll probably be little to no change. Well, I kind of want to know what's the inside information.
Well, let's think about the three big programs that matter. If you're an older American, and by the way, I turned 65 in January, and I will tell you, Terry, that the old doctor set me down, he said, Frank, you're now an adult. We're going to give you an adult physical. I'd never had an adult physical before. I'd never been probed in such places. I'd never had so much stuff taken from me.
Amen.
And then they took away my soda pop.
Uh-oh.
When I drive by Sonic, I have visions of a Dr. Pepper float, but that's never going to happen again, apparently. Point is, Social Security and Medicare are primarily for folks over 65 who have disability issues under the Social Security law. The two programs, and we'll talk about Medicaid, the two programs are something we all need to pay attention to. But first, Social Security is different than Medicaid or Medicare because Social Security was created by a bunch of old Southern conservative Democrats in the 1930s. Yeah, Franklin Roosevelt was the president, but you had these old conservatives drawing up the law. We have an issue very soon about not having enough money coming in to cover all the obligations going out. Because remember 1935 when the law was set up, it was based on certain assumptions. One, there was no 62 early drawing. There was no Social Security for widows or orphans, no Social Security disability. It was an old age pension. And they designed the kick-in age at 65. Now think about the world in the 1930s. Contrary to what my children believe, I wasn't there. In the 1930s. Go pull an insurance company actuarial table, and you'll find that most Caucasian males were expected to die at 64 3/4 because it was a different world. You physically worked hard on the farm. You physically worked hard in the factory. And there was no open heart surgery. There was no knee replacements. There was no penicillin. There was no this, no that, no transplants. You got sick after you worked a long, hard life, you died. By the way, I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that's the world in 1935. Don't let me get caught in an Iowa paradox here. Some of you watch these stories, but now we live longer. How many of you would go to a funeral for a lady in her mid-80s and they will say quietly on the back row of the church, she got cheated out of some of her life. She died early. Or a man in his 70s, people go, how did that happen? How did he die so young? Point is, we live longer, we do more with it, and then the other thing was, they figured the birth rate would always be going up. And in the 30s, it collapsed. My father reminded me when I got married, you can't feed them, you can't have them. Which, by the way, is still not a bad policy. And in the baby boomers, when I came along, this giant explosion after the Second World War, the point is we have waves and curves. If you don't make adjustments in Social Security, there will come a time in the near future when under the 35 law, we'll start to prorate the money up. What does that mean? When the trust fund's gone, the money comes in 1 month, will be prorated out amongst everybody the next month. So if there's enough money for 95%, everybody gets 95% of the check. 70%, 70% of the check. 102%, everybody gets 100% of their check. Because the law says you can't take money out of the general fund. Move forward to Medicaid. Medicaid, health care for those of us past 65, passed by Lyndon Johnson and liberal Democrats, not Southern conservatives. Medicare is set up so that when the service is submitted for reimbursement, the federal government has to reimburse it whether the money's in the Medicare trust fund or not. So if you don't have enough, then it comes out of the general fund. That actually is a bigger problem, sooner problem, than Social Security. So it will explode the deficit. Now, Medicaid, another Lyndon Johnson project for folks under a certain economic level below 65. But it is a different program in that it's a cost share thing between the states and the federal government on administering and doing it. But it also is designed for the bill to keep going to the Treasury. So bottom line is this. At some point, this is why we had to address Medicaid in the legislation this spring, was to try and get a grip on the spending. At some point, we're going to have to address how to fund or to make the expenditures on Medicare more efficient. But on Social Security, you only have a couple choices. You either prorate the money out, as the federal law calls for, on the books, or you do what Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill agreed to again in the 80s, remember? Anyone born after January 1, 1960, you have to be 67 to draw the full check. Not 65, 67. Do you push that retirement age on out? Do you increase the tax paid by both the employer and the employee, or if you're self-employed, all by yourself as the employee? How do you adjust that? Republicans tend to not want to raise people's taxes. And I know it's shocking to you, but we don't like that. But by the same token, I would tell you, there comes a point in time when people who physically work for a living are going to be wore out. You can't change the rules once you're to a certain stage in your life. So you put your thumb on one of the biggest problems out there, but in the immediate future, especially on Social Security and Medicare, you could sleep tonight. Just know that we have to do something.
Real quick.
Long answer, and I'm sorry, but it's a really big question.
And I got a quick follow-up.
Okay.
the fact that we're eliminating illegals that have been drawing for Social Security, for instance, is that gonna extend the fund longer?
Eliminating the illegals will help, in particular, Medicaid.
Okay,
It'll help Medicaid. There is an irony about Social Security though, because every illegal who has a not real number, who uses it to get a job, if you work for an employer, a reputable person, they're withholding your taxes anyway. And when that money gets to the Treasury on a hot number that doesn't exist, they can never draw it out. So there's actually quite a bit of cash in the Social Security Trust Fund from illegals,
okay. I
that
didn't
all
realize
illegals
that.
are gonna benefit from. Yes.
Okay,
In this district, I live and die of these issues because this is important.
thanks for clearing that up.
Can you
Let's
explain
see.
that? I don't understand what you.
In Social Security, remember, if you work for
I
an
understood
employer,
that, but how will illegals benefit from that money that's being withheld?
no, they don't.
Oh, they don't.
They
Okay.
don't. They're paying in, but they can't get anything out.
Thank you.
Jay, you're next.
Frank, I don't know, if you're deep into the agricultural side of Congress, well-positioned.
Mhm.
I don't know what your personal agricultural background is, and if you might or might not have association with the wind turbine companies. I know you're out west. Can you? and
I can
will
see
you-
them from my back porch.
Good.
Miles.
Can you and will you introduce legislation to stop the incursion of the wind turbines?
Well, first, let me respond. I'm always sensitive about personal property rights and what you do with your property. But basically, the states brought that to a conclusion, haven't they? Haven't they made it harder? But also on the federal level, remember one of President Trump's great efforts and a part of various bills is to turn off the so-called green energy tax credits. You don't have tax credits, if you don't have accelerated depreciation, there's no economic incentive to build those things. The wind is over.
Do you think it's over?
Well, let me give you a more cautious response. I don't believe there'll be new contracts for new construction issued done in the future because the tax incentives won't be there. I can't say that the things that were contracted for and things that were started won't be completed. They probably will. Let me give you a more precise answer.
That's fair.
Mike? Oh, I'm sorry, you were next, and then I'm
I was
sorry.
next, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Congressman, I think you said in your opening statement that welfare programs are the biggest part of the federal government? Something like that.
Discretion, mandatory money, yes.
But I understand that.
Discretionary spending,
I
not.
understand that 39% of the federal government goes to pay nothing more than interest on our national debt, which at this point stands at $37 trillion.
Valid point.
I have heard that the big beautiful bill that you just voted on is going to increase the national debt by $7 trillion over the next 10 years. Aren't we headed for the point where the majority of our federal budget is just going to be paying interest on our national debt? And what can we do about it?
CBO actually scored it at $3.5 trillion, and that's a fair question. But I would argue in the way that the 1974 Act counts these things, the way that the laws that have been used in the past count these things, you don't get credit for changes that encourage more business that will ultimately lead to more revenue coming in. And we're gonna find out for real very soon. But I would suggest to you, if we had, and some of my very fiscally conservative colleagues in Congress said, they didn't say it to you, but they were saying in the hallways in the cloakroom, let's don't pass this, let's just let all this expire, let's let the new revenue come in, and then we'll use that to get a grip on our spending. It didn't. No one in their right mind would believe that giving my friends more money to work with would cause them to be more responsible with the new money. You can see where I'm coming from here. If you could, we'd have taxed ourselves into prosperity a long time ago. I sincerely believe that if we had allowed all those taxes to kick back up, we would have disincentivized business and individuals from working harder, longer, more effective, and we'd have actually driven the economy into a nosedive. And the same people then who said, don't keep the tax relief in place, let's raise more revenue, would say, oh my God, the economy's got tough. We got to spend more money to offset all this. So we're going to find out. And every one of us who voted for it, ultimately, will pay a price if we're wrong. That's why you have House elections every 2 years, Senate elections every 6 years on rotation.
Michael, you're next.
big concern of mine is the dysfunction between the Democrats and the Republicans in Congress. Over the years, I've seen it get worse and worse.
Yes.
They pass stuff down to make one-upsmanship. Our party does this better
Yes.
than that does, and there's not a whole lot of cooperation. First part of that question is, how bad is it? And the second part is, what can we do about it? Other than elect new people to get in there.
It's bad, and it is a combination of things. And I've been around long enough, and before that I was in the legislature, and before that I was a county chairman and vice chairman. I spent a tour of duty as 6th district congressional chairman back when we still had 6 congressional districts. So I've been involved in party stuff and the political process a long time. Several mistakes, because everything is a compounded issue. Nothing's ever really simple. Part of it's campaign finance. From the founding of the country until 1974, campaign money was raised by candidates and it was raised by parties. County party, district party, state party, the federal party. But when you had parties raising the money, you had them raising money and focusing it on candidates and campaign issues the party could agree on. When you had candidates raising the money, you could hold us accountable. You said you were gonna, and you didn't. I'm never giving you again. Same could be held to parties. But in 1974, after Watergate, Congress passed the 1974 Campaign Act. And the great idea was, we're gonna take all this money that's flowing through candidates' pockets and party pockets, and we're gonna bring it up into the open. So they created something called Political Action Committees, PACs. Well, what's PACs? They're not a party, they're not a candidate, but they're an individual or a group of individuals who care about one, typically, right, Kim? One issue. And they raise their money and they use their money like a sledgehammer for their one issue. To heck with the rest of the issues. To heck with anyone else's opinion. So you created this super special interest business, right? Move forward from there to something called McCain-Feingold, which basically enabled the super PACs, something that wasn't envisioned in the 74 Act. And then you had a Supreme Court ruling that said a corporation for free speech purposes is an individual. And that's when the super PACs came alive. So now you have people who want to, or individuals, who want to play hard in a particular race, and they wait till the last minute, right? They create a super PAC. They dump amounts of money that are beyond anything under regular campaign law allowable. The super PACs pop up and nuke somebody. Generally, they don't help. They're burn you down programs, and then they dissolve. Poof, in the ether, I think is the phrase. That's a big part of the problem. Second part of the problem is that we have an electronic media, both online and radio, and newspaper always were opinionated, but television, that now everyone has figured out the way to market their programs is to go off and pick up a niche. Some of you remember Paul Harvey. How many good home remedies did he sell when he was doing the news? But he was doing the general news. But now you've got Sean Hannity and you've got Rachel Maddow as examples who drive their programs to reach out and get a certain viewer group so that they can market that to certain viewer groups. It's no accident that Sean Hannity likes to sell gold coins. I don't know what Rachel sells, gummies, but whatever it is, that was a very weak attempt at humor, by the way. So the electronic media is driving people to the corners, and they're getting shriller to maintain their market share. Doesn't matter who. If you don't have people watching you, you can't sell advertising. Therefore, the wilder and crazier. Then throw on top of that these things. Some of you might remember that when the internet started becoming really effectively public 25 years ago, 28 years ago, the bright boys and girls told us that this would be the great equalizer of society. That we'd have all this open thought and the facts would prevail and you wouldn't have to get your Encyclopedia Britannica out or ask your congressman, you just look it up. I find this thing to be the most amazing gossip toy in the history of the world. Amen. I pay my taxes on time, by the way, for the record. I'm still married to the same woman, for the record. I've always been a man, for the record. All the stuff that you're liable to see whacking somebody out there. So that's a part of the problem. The bottom line is, It's just the world has changed and all these pieces are making it harder. I chaired the Farm Ag Committee for ranking member and chairman for 6 years, and I did the 14 Farm Bill. My biggest challenge was trying to get people to ignore the nonsense and look at the stuff and learn the language. Because feeding people or making sure we can raise the food and fiber we need is a more precise definition. Because if you do that, everything else takes care of itself. And we pass legislation to do that. And I would always lose my crazies on the left because I was supporting those Bible-carrying, gun-toting, crazy right-wingers out in the countryside. They're the level crazy. But some of my right-wing friends were so idealistic that they couldn't spend anything on anybody for any reason. Well, that's better than the crazies on the left, but it's not always practical. You got to do certain things. Point is, we've worked our way to this. And all I can do is work every day to try on your behalf, to press your points, to try and educate my colleagues back east. It's just a struggle. It's a struggle.
Yeah, the one way to eliminate it would be just vote all the Democrats out of Congress. That would smooth the road quite a bit. No argument.
Maybe.
Folks, we need to remember when it comes to Congress or the state capitol, the linchpin of a republic is compromise. Every bill ends up getting compromised to one degree or another so we can get enough votes so it can get passed. The only way to avoid that is to have a dictator. And as everyone in here, or all my regulars know, I would love to have that job, and I'm still waiting for that phone call. And both of my ex-wives would swear on a stack of Bibles, I've got all the requirements for that.
And even 2,000 plus years ago, when the Roman Senate turned it over to Julius Caesar,
Yeah.
they started their own demise.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, okay, your first question here, yes.
Being, deep in the ag.
Yes, sir.
When the administration early on, I don't want to say cuts, but stopped a lot of foreign aid, and the news was showing these warehouses full of grain and peanuts that was going to make these products to ship overseas. So what happened to all those warehouses of grain and peanuts?
The administration, once they figured everything out, quietly had to make some adjustments. A certain amount of those products were waste lost and had to be destroyed, but the lion's share of it wound up in the right place. Part of the challenge of the Doge group, let's talk about Elon and the Doge group, was that they launched into this with great enthusiasm. They were going to make great differences, but there's so many things going on that are so complex, so detail-oriented, with so much history behind it. I say this respectfully, but having an army of 27 and 28-year-olds, they didn't understand everything they were doing. And they made some mistakes, most of which have been corrected now. And we've moved forward. Elon seemed to be pretty happy until we started talking about his electric car tax credits. But that's a side note.
Her first question here.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was curious about, well, not curious, I'm very concerned about the data centers, how they've been fast-tracked by President Trump, and what I, of course, respect property rights.
Absolutely.
But,
Or you wouldn't be in this room. Absolutely.
Pardon?
If you didn't respect property rights, you wouldn't be in this room. Absolutely.
Thank you. Tax credits, are they being, the solar farms and the data centers?
I can't answer specifically about the tax issues on the data centers, but I know on essentially the renewable energy, that stuff, either it's been turned off in the two big bills we passed, or the administration simply is not accepting applications anymore. You see, when you run the federal government's president, you run the bureaucracy, and you'd be surprised at the number of places where they just turned the switch off.
But you
No,
don't know
you
about,
still,
you don't know about.
I
data
can't answer, I
centers?
can't specifically answer about the data
You know,
centers.
they're putting pressure on, there's some trying to go in Kingfisher County, as well as Luther, Stillwater, and Tulsa, I believe. And they're putting a great deal of pressure, they're approaching citizens exactly the way the Turbine people came in.
And some of that goes back to the challenges of having these phones in our pockets. Because with the advance of AI, and you should be very sensitive about AI, it just consumes that much more computing power, consumes that much more storage, consumes that much more electricity, energy to run. So for everybody to be able to play every ultimate game they've had or ever had in their life, it's changing our world. Yeah.
Next question, first question back here.
Yeah, Frank. There's about 98% of the wheat crop in Oklahoma is harvested. There's several thousand acres left in Kay County and Grant County that's not harvested and probably won't be.
It's gotta be sprouted by now, doesn't it?
Because of sprout.
Yep.
I cut 2 samples of 2 fields day before yesterday that was 33 to 36% sprout. I cut one last week that was 46% sprout. But the problem.
You're getting to the point of not even being good hog feed.
Well, the crop insurance people, the adjusters are telling us different things. They're not telling the same story.
Okay?
And one is saying, well, you gotta harvest it because there's a place in Wellington, Kansas that'll pay $1.85 for it. And that's if it's 20% sprout. But if it's more than that, they're gonna dock it more. Plus you'll have a test weight loss because test weights are way down.
Oh, absolutely.
What can we do?
Let me talk to my people on Monday. I wasn't aware quite the magnitude of the problem. Matter of fact, I kind of figured everybody, the insurance adjusters would have canceled it all out and given up and told you go plow.
Well, then you have to destroy it before you can get paid, but you can't destroy it because it's muddy. How? You know, the weeds have taken over. You can't even go out there to spray them.
Nope, I understand.
Your second
Let me ask some
question
questions on Monday.
My second question is about the Constitution.
Yes, sir.
I am a very strong believer in due process. And I see due process as making the news. I know that the people on January the 6th that attacked the Capitol, they were all given due process, brought before a judge. They had a trial. And even, the president was given
What's your
a trial.
question? You're making
My
a speech.
question is this.
Well, ask the
If a
question.
person comes in here illegally and they have become good citizens and they have married, they have children in our schools, they're working,
Ask your
should they
question,
be denied due process according to the 5th and the 14th Amendment?
That's being fought out in the courts all over the country. But I will say this. Ignorance of the law is no excuse ever for breaking the law. And the fact that previous administrations chose not to enforce the law, not just Biden, this goes back farther than that, not to enforce the law shouldn't automatically give somebody a go-free card. But by the same token, we are at the point in time, I think, where the flow of illegals is so turned off, we need to move on with addressing these issues and decide how we want to handle it. But I can't do that till the president declares victory on the border. You won't let me.
And by entering the country illegally, they are criminals. It's bottom line. They came in as a criminal first minute they were here. Joe, your next question?
Change gears a little bit. Are you aware of State Question 836?
Remind me what it is. We do a lot of state questions anymore.
The one that's gonna change the way the primaries work.
Jungle primaries. You know,
I've been around the political process a long time. I started out as vice chairman of the Roger Mills County Election Board before I ever ran for office. Oklahoma adopted a closed primary system with runoffs at statehood.
yes.
The goal was to make sure that the political party system functioned. It was to make sure that the voters had more choices. In the 1930s, they dropped the runoff elections because we were having 100 people file for every office because of the Depression. And by the late 30s, by the 1940s, the Democrats who were in control figured out they were electing crazy people. So we went back to having runoffs and closed primaries, although now you technically we can invite the independents to come vote with us if we want.
They vote.
We've never done that, but the Democrats have. We can invite them to come vote. I have no problem personally with the present system the way it is.
I'm just saying that there's a state question coming up.
I'm not voting for that.
And-
As a citizen,
Right.
I'm just a citizen.
I was just asking, is there something that you in your capacity as a congressman or whatever can do to help make sure sure that doesn't.
State issue.
Well,
Let me think about that. There are, again, I'm a federal official, so I watch what happens at state capitol. I watch the things that are going on. There are several pieces in play on this primary question. This is not just a textbook exercise. Somebody's trying to gain position,
Yeah.
obviously.
yes.
If you're asked to sign the petition for SQ, state question 836, don't sign it. If we'd have been in place in the last governor's election, the final ballot in November, we would have had 2 Democrats to choose from.
Oh, yeah.
The way that works. So keep that in mind.
A similar system in California has basically
Yeah.
exterminated the Republican Party in
Yeah.
California.
Yeah.
It has. Bear in mind on state questions, and this is another symptom of the world we live in. In 1907, we were very, quote, progressive. Don't throw that word back at me. They put in a constitution about the legislature could send things by referendum for a vote of citizens, and you could also circulate petitions, the initiative petition. And from 1907 to 1982, we turned down 90% of all state questions. Now we seem to pass everything that's on the ballot. Maybe we don't read as well as we used to, I suppose. No, we haven't accepted everyone, but we passed most state questions. How many times has the labor commissioner been appointed and elected and appointed and elected? That's bounced back and forth in the last 40 years.
Okay, second question over here.
What's your opinion on the use of farmland being the natural resources of water and then, of course, of electricity to supply the necessary needs to run a data center or a solar farm? How's that gonna affect our farmland, in your opinion?
The biggest, I think, and again, I'm not an engineer. I'm a farmer with an Ag Econ degree. So let me go from there and simply say, these data centers require massive amounts of electricity. So the siting questions have to involve that. Most of the 3rd Congressional District, for that matter, Oklahoma, doesn't have enough water. And we've not built a lot of new generation capacity. Reliable, I'm not talking about renewable, reliable power in how long? Maybe the coal plant at down in Hugo with the Rural Electrics, or the coal plant not far from here. That may be the 2 most recent. And it started out as a nuclear plant, but got switched to coal. If you're into ancient history.
Some of these data centers, I've heard they're gonna be putting a nuclear plant there just to power the data centers.
I have read, see, there is under development these, not big plants like 3 Mile Island, but smaller modular nuclear
Yeah.
plants, and that's what they're, I've read about that. I have.
They've got one that fits in a shipping container and I think it'll power a city the size of 50,000.
Well, they're using materials that don't have as long of a half-life either, so.
Right, yeah, they're much cleaner nuclear.
Yeah.
They've made a lot of advances in that. I've got another question from an online.
Okay.
Reference the BBB, the Big Beautiful Bill. There were sections in there addressing the NFA, the National Firearms Act of 1934, short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, and suppressors. And they were in and out of the bill. And then the final bill, they were kept in, but the tax was reduced from $200 to $0. But you still have to go in and fingerprint and get photographed to buy one of those. Do you have any ideas on where that might end up?
If you still have a Republican majority after the 26th election, we'll take another shot at it.
Fantastic.
I would say there was a lot of Republican principles in the bills that left the House and that the Republicans in the Senate wanted to have. But this bird bath process, this parliamentarian thing, a whole bunch of them kicked out. Reduced the savings of the overall bill dramatically.
It's my understanding, twice the Supreme Court has ruled that the NFA is constitutional because it is a tax act and Congress has the power to tax. And with the tax gone, there's been several suits filed by Second Amendment groups, national ones, to try and get that, maybe get the whole NFA thrown out, but at least that part of it.
Again, I'm not an attorney, but that seems logical to me because in the 1930s, when the Roosevelt administration couldn't get much of their New Deal through, that's what they came back with was tax issues to balance off of that to get what they wanted done. Remember the National
That was the time,
Recovery Act?
1934. Okay. Glenn, second question.
Another question. This concerns health insurance payments by insurance companies.
Okay.
I have a son that works in the healthcare industry, and he says that insurance companies periodically, once a year or so, will change their codes.
Okay,
They're not notified. So they'll go a month, they'll get all this back and say, this is not the right code. And so they then have to go through a process of getting the right codes and then resubmitting all the requests for payments. So they're delayed 2 and 3 months before they get payment.
a little bit like, I think sometimes big box retailers move the shelves around to make me walk around longer trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Amen.
You get there, and it just takes longer. Yeah.
Right.
Let me follow up on that. That hadn't been brought to my attention, but I see how that could be the case.
Right, yeah, so they seem to have a problem with that.
Nathan's thumbs are going wild back there typing stuff down.
You're up next, Wayne. Yeah, go ahead, you're up.
That same issue is dealing with the VA. It seems like they just run you in circles. And they have programs to do this, and you gotta fulfill this program to get this program. And your problem is way down here, and you can't get it in a year to even get to deal with it. What do we do about something like that?
It's just an ongoing struggle. And I will be upfront with you, DOJ talked about a 25% reduction in VA when they came in January. And finally, enough of us got their attention and said, now understand the VA, it is a service provider organization, primarily focused on healthcare and healthcare related issues. So if you're gonna save 25% by running off people, who are you gonna run off? You're gonna run off nurses? You're gonna run off physical therapists? You're gonna run off the maintenance people that keep those buildings up? You're gonna run off the doctors? You're gonna run off the administrators who code and do the paperwork? Well, they backed off, but they didn't understand. The big debate back east for 20 years has been, and I don't mean to blow up my Legionnaires or my VFW folks in the room or my DBA people, but the big debate back east has been ongoing about, are we better served by maintaining the VA system we have now, or would you be better off to take a lot of money to run the whole thing and divide it up among the veterans to go buy their own health insurance or purchase their own services? Now, it's not gone anywhere, but that's been the big backroom debate. Would you get better services to vets? I hope if you've utilized the system, I hope, as frustrating as it may be, at least we've gotten done what you needed, I hope. Nope, that answers that question, okay? Clearly, understandably.
Again?
Yeah, with the midterm elections, I hate to say it, quickly coming to fruition.
Right over the hill.
Yeah. What's your impression or feeling that we're gonna be able to keep the Republican Party together to fight that? It's starting to fragment, and what do we have to do to keep it together?
If we don't play as a team, we get wiped off the field. We just will. Start at the top. Call him the coach if you want, call him the quarterback, whatever you want to call him, President Trump. He and his inner circle are more engaged now in this point in Senate and congressional races than they ever were the previous 4 years he was in office. They just didn't worry about it. But what happened midterm last time? You get Pelosi as Speaker, you get the Democrat majority leader in the Senate, and they tortured him for 2 years. Harassed him, tortured him, politically. Well, legally too. They understand that now, so they're engaged. So I'm not so concerned about the president and his super PAC and his political staff, his White House people. They're engaged. In the Senate, there's a difference of opinion between two factions. But right now, I think Senator Thune from South Dakota has probably as good will as anybody amongst the group. And they've spent enough time in the minority in the last 20 years that they understand they have to keep control of the judges. Remember, the ability to confirm judges and confirm cabinet appointments, critically important. Critically important, because that's a legacy thing. Elected officials go away. Judges stay till they die or take senior status under the federal system. So I'm not so nervous about that. In the House, it's a much more complicated place. We had an internal rumble at the beginning, not this term, but previous term. And the majority basically allowed the Democrats to throw out our speaker, McCarthy. Now, was he perfect? No. My father used to say the last perfect person was 2,000 years ago. McCarthy's not perfect either. By the way, my father's right too. Johnson from Louisiana is my speaker now. Is he Sam Rayburn? Is he Newt Gingrich? Is he John Boehner, Paul Ryan? No. But he's the one person we could gel on together, we could agree on, be speaker. And he's trying so hard. And he has a relationship with the president unlike anybody else in Congress. And if you have a relationship with Donald Trump, I take that back. The strongest relationship with the president that I know of is our junior United States Senator. Well, Mark Wayne Mullen, the president. Tight.
He's been real vocal about it too.
I know. Tight. But I have several people in the House who are running for Senate in states at home or running for governor. And that makes the team play a lot harder. And I have some very idealistic folks who are so principled that they would let us go in the minority so that they could vote the right way every time. But then you're surrendering to the crazies again. So we're a mildly dysfunctional family that's going to have to work really hard for the next year and a half to get there. It's just frustrating at times, just be honest.
Second question for Bill. Yes, second. Honorable Sir, let's see. I agree with you that the Democratic Party has been electing crazies ever since the 1930s. But that's not what you said. But that could get in the papers just like you said it. You know what that is. That's conflation or something like that. Lousy press. I'm worried that people, if I may, I'm worried that people stir things up and put in crazy ideas and divide us and all kinds of stuff on the internet, which is a public utility. And they need to sign their names. Can we require people to doggone it, identify yourself and sit down and shut up?
I don't have you a legal answer. I don't disagree with you at all. At least in the old newspaper concept, you could withhold your name, but every newspaper I ever dealt with required that signed letter be on file. If somebody wanted to walk in the office and look, could. Now, newspapers are protected in a way that no other media is because they predate the Constitution. Remember who the most famous newspaper man and Postmaster General of the United States was at the beginning of the country? Ben Franklin. Maybe one of the most effective dirty old politicians that ever came down the track. He was awesome. But on the electronic media side, because you're using the airways, radio or TV, and it can be argued that you're using the telecommunication system of the country, that falls under a different category. From the 50s until, was it the 90s, the Fair Doctrine Act, where if you had access to the airwaves, you had to present both sides, that went away, which most of us cheered as an ability now to really have a good discussion. But it's gotten out of control. I would agree with you. A big step would be making sure that there's no one hiding in the shadows, that if you feel it's strong enough to say it, that you should be willing to admit it. As my father told me as a teenager, if you're going to be doing it, you better be proud to do it. I don't know what he meant, but don't know what he meant. But, yeah.
Is that it for questions? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Sure.
I got a question. Is about the fair tax.
The fair tax?
Yes.
I'm a big proponent of the fair tax. I've been on the bill for 25 years. Switch from an income tax, excise taxes, to a consumption tax. Call it a sales tax if you want. Oh, my goodness. What you would do in the first year by taking a system right now that every time you work harder, you work longer, you save anything, you have any luck, you pay more and more and more, to a point where the more you built, the more you created, until you enjoyed the fruits of your labor and spent that money. Oh, and it would bring in the underground economy. I'll be careful in my choice of words there. The underground economy, so that everybody paid their taxes, because it didn't matter how you made your money. When you bought that Cadillac or that house or that popcorn ball, you'd pay your taxes. And you wouldn't need the IRS, because we already have 48 tax commissions in the 50 states to collect it. I'd let Luttrell handle the money as it passed through the federal government. I trust the state in that regard. It's the most awesome thing, but you know why it's so hard to do? Think about how many tax preparers there are out there who wouldn't have a job anymore. Think about all the lobbyists who put all the funny little tax breaks in the tax code. All the folks who spend a lifetime or a generation maneuvering and manipulating. Suddenly that goes away because we're all playing by the same rules in an understandable fashion. It's an amazing thing. It's just one of those things like going to heaven. It seems obvious, but a lot of people have a lot of hard time getting there.
Since you mentioned the IRS, I gotta throw something in. We all know the 84,000 that Biden was gonna add to the IRS. Trump threw all that out.
Yeah.
Last week, he fired 26,000 IRS employees, and his budget for 2027 for the IRS is less than half of the budget from 2025. Folks, that's why we elected him. And he's probably the only guy that could do that.
Now I'm going to add one caveat.
Now,
Whether it's IRS or any other federal agency, I want them to shift some money. I want people to be able to return your phone calls.
yeah.
I have a hard time getting mine returned at the IRS. And BIA is just as complicated.
I've quit trying to call him with any questions.
It should not work that way.
No, I
But you're
agree.
exactly
I
right.
agree. Joe, your third question.
Well, a couple of things. You were talking a minute ago about, the gentleman was talking about when you post something online, that you should put your name with it. And I agree with that, but I disagree that the government has the right to force that. Because then you're getting into violation of like the First, the Fourth, and Fifth Amendments.
But I think the argument could be made that if you're doing it on a radio show or TV show, those entities have a license to use the broadband, not the broadband, the airwaves. And in the social media, you're using the telecommunications system of the country. But it's a fair point. It's a fair point.
I mean, it's one of those things where someone has elected to, we own the airwaves and we regulate the airwaves.
But always under law, if you say, or someone says something that is an outright lie or destructive to another individual, if it's in print, they can be sued for slander.
Yeah.
And if it's oral, it's liable, or vice versa. You've always had the ability to address such things, but if you can't determine who your false accuser is, how do you address that? Now, I know public officials are different. You are real people. Well, two of us are not, but the rest of you are real people. You can say whatever you want to about me, and all I can do is roll my eyes and wonder if Linda Lucas would agree with you. But it makes the discourse more
Like if
complicated.
you're using Facebook or whatever, and they can, you're paying to use a platform or whatever, sure, they can require it. I just don't think it's the government's right to require that kind of thing.
Well,
That's,
maybe.
I didn't know.
Well, maybe. And one of the things that President Trump's going to have to address before this year's over is his willingness to protect his honor by suing people, but you can't sue him because he's president. It's an interesting dichotomy.
Yes. On January 20, President Trump pardoned most of the political prisoners of January 6th. I was wondering if you could tell me what steps Congress will be taking to make some sort of restitution to those whose lives have been decimated by the way our government has persecuted them?
Honestly, I'm not close enough or familiar enough with the issue to give you an answer. I don't know whether that would go through judiciary or appropriations or reclaims in the federal courts. I don't know the answer to that. I don't.
Her family has been really active in personally helping many of these J6ers when they got released, because they got released, didn't have any money in their pocket. People that they've worked with have driven them all over the country to get them home. So they've really been in the front lines of the fight for these people.
And again, I'm not an attorney, so I don't know the legal standing you would have in a pardon versus the legal term for having the sentence turned over on for cause. I just don't know the answers.
Bill, fourth question for me.
Yeah, well, third, yeah, well,
Third,
okay.
whatever.
Thank you, sir, in the red shirt for joining. The internet can also be thought of as a bulletin board. And it's a public electronic bulletin board, so you're not just making a phone call, you're accessing a bulletin board that everyone else can access and such. Okay? May have a different function.
Okay, third question for you.
Yes. Do you still support sending our taxpayer dollars to Ukraine, and how long will you continue to support that?
I have a record of helping people who are trying to defend themselves, but I would suggest to you in the present administration, most of the focus now has been on selling stuff to the Europeans, our quote NATO allies, who are then giving it to Ukrainians. So we're not paying the bill.
So we're deferring that taxpayer payment to Ukraine?
What the president has said in the last month is basically he will allow the British and the French and Germans and other entities to buy military equipment from us, and if they give it to the Ukrainians, it's not coming out of your treasury.
I've got a question. There's been numerous reports about the Ukrainians selling as much as sometimes 50% of the weapons we've shipped them to various entities around the world, including the cartels in Latin America. Do you have any views on that or insight?
I don't have any access to information. Again, I'm not on the right committees of jurisdiction. But if indeed that's the case, that's a real problem.
Yeah. What I'm reading is that the cartels now have sophisticated surface-to-air missiles. And so anyway, that's, of course, I heard that on the internet, and the two things I've learned in life, if it's a rumor in Tonkawa, or if it's on the internet, it's gotta be true, right? Thanks for addressing it. Jay, again.
Yeah, to the same issue, Ukraine. Are we moving anywhere for a true reconciliation of all the money we gave them and where the hell it went? Because they've got a bunch of corrupt SOBs over there.
Well, the accounting is ongoing, and as I understand it, that was part of the president's deal with the Ukrainians about having mining concessions for the rare earth minerals and a variety of things. His view was that's how you get your value back.
Yeah.
Hunter's out of work over there, though.
Yeah.
Hunter, yeah, is out of work.
Right.
As somebody who is originally from Latvia, who has family in Ukraine, I have a question. Now, Latvia is a part of NATO.
Exactly.
And Putin has, on national television, numerously said that the next place he's going for are the Baltic countries. So is there anything being done to tell Putin that that won't be acceptable because we're part of NATO? Because Russians don't ask as somebody who's from there. They just take.
That's why all the NATO allies have troops regularly stationed there training, but not just Latvia, Estonia, and the other countries in Poland. I've got to tell you a story. I was on a trip with a speaker at the time, Hastert, 20-some years ago. And I went along because of the ag issues. He wanted an ag committee member who understood ag to be with him. But we went to the prime minister's, I don't remember who it was at the time, prime minister's office in Warsaw, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. And the prime minister's entire focus was, you need to move your military troops from West Germany to Poland. We want you, they don't. We will give you 99-year leases. We'll give you training grounds. We'll sell you whatever you need. Bring your troops to Poland. This is 20, 25 years ago. We leave the meeting, and I say to the speaker, oh my goodness, that man was frantic. I can't imagine being that frantic about having someone put an army in your country. Speaker looks at me and says, well, if for the last 500 years, Frank, you had lived between the Germans and the Russians, you'd want an uncle too.
Amen.
500 years get stomped on by everybody and the whole region.
Well, as somebody from there, we saw Germans when they came in, Nazis technically, as saviors in some way because because we were under occupation by Russia, and it was so bad they tried to commit genocide. So,
when the Nazis and the communists split Poland in '39 and basically lined up all the military officers and all the academics and all the business people and shot them all. I mean, that was a pretty strong statement. There wasn't much difference.
What type of relationship does Lithuania have with Poland? Are you friendly
I'm
with
from
them?
Latvia, but yeah,
Latvia, excuse
we
me.
are friendly with them because it's just a case of we're all in the same belt, and
Yeah.
we all felt what it's like to live under Russian occupation.
Well, and they're building one of the most powerful armies in Europe now, is my understanding. Yeah.
We're building because of the conflict, obviously, on the border, and Putin is getting more and more. It's just a case of we know what they're like. I know it
Yeah.
sounds weird, but we know what they don't ask for things. The things that he says on national television, he will do. He will take eventually. He's just waiting for the right moment. And it's a bit scary at the moment there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, it looks like that's it. Okay, Nathan, don't wait till the last minute, my friend. Nathan is vice chair here in Cape.
Absolutely. I started out as vice chairman. Local party.
What is the best way for us to contact you to find out where you stand on bills and let you know what we think on specific things?
In the modern world, people use lots of email. I would suggest you the written letter still matters because that shows a willingness to send. And I would also suggest, whether it's me or the senators or anybody in the federal government, writing an individual letter where you're stressing your points, asking your questions. We get lots of form letters from lots of places, but knowing that you cared enough about the issue to sit down and concisely communicate with us, that matters.
Does handwritten make a difference? More impact?
I say respectfully because, and I'm not talking about you, but the under 30 generation, I have a hard time reading their penmanship.
Fair enough.
A little sarcasm, a little humor there, but yes.
Well, it's always funnier when it's based in truth. Okay, folks, listen, he's taken up basically his entire Saturday to come
I'm
here.
going back to the farm from here.
Yeah, and he's almost in Texas, right, when you get home? Yeah. And I'll tell you what, we've got chapters out there, and I've been out there many times, and people in western Oklahoma are 24-karat patriots.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's give him a big hand, folks. Great presentation. Bye, Juan Diaz. You say in Mexico. Hey, can I have a picture with you?
I would be more.